never thought was an ice storm in Alabama would cross the path of the Dire Straits tour. Last night it got down to, we think, maybe even single digits, and the car won't start. So we let it sit for 4 hours in the sun, and we're hoping that it'll fire up.
Everybody, this is Tom Jackson with Equipment World Magazine. We are here today with Dan McNichol on the Dire Straits Tour. And Dan, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're doing, what this car means, and what you've been doing the last couple of months in it.
Well, thanks for having me in Tuscaloosa. And I'm a 5th generation road builder. My father's side of the family has been in road building for 5 generations here in the United States. I'm fascinated, I think, like everybody, how things get put together, cities or projects or a piece of equipment, a car. And I've been involved in some big projects in my time. I've been working on projects like the Big Dig. I've written some books about these projects, like the Eisenhower Interstate System. Okay. And it's just for me a give back. I've never advocated before, and that's why I'm doing this. That's where I am right now with my connection to the industry and my cause for this tour. I've been on tour since October 3rd. I left out of Boston. And I've been circumnavigating the United States, hitting population centers, hitting points of infrastructure interest, spots where either infrastructure is failing or it's succeeding.
Okay, and what have you found? What showed up in your tour of the country?
A bit of everything, and it has been that. It's been a journey about exploring. But Seattle, the largest milling machine in the world, built in Japan, manufactured in Japan, deployed underneath the city of Seattle to build a 2-story high 4-lane tunnel. Detroit, infrastructure gone rotten, gone rusty. All the way through the country we've been seeing the good and the bad, speaking to thought leaders, speaking to people building the work, people who are just opinionated citizens that are of interest. And it's been fascinating to see just how much it's on people's minds, more than they probably realize.
Okay, and now if I were going to go coast to coast myself, I would probably choose a nice, comfortable rental car. Can you explain a little bit about the car you chose and the patina it shows, and why this is symbolic, as you say?
Well, this is America's infrastructure. America's infrastructure, we've been telling people, is as old and rusty and energy defunct as this original Detroit lead sled, this 1949 Hudson.
Okay.
And I think you'll get it right away. People start laughing right away. And that's kind of the intent, is to keep the subject approachable.
And how much fun has it been to drive a car with bias tires, disc brakes, and just tell us.
We are keeping it real on Dire Straits.
Okay.
And the car has bias plies, like you pointed out, and it moves and it rolls. And it's very hard driving this car. It's really hard. It's torturous. But it does drive home the point. And there are those euphoric moments when you light up a conversation with people who just gather, and they tend to be workers. They tend to be people who just know the background but don't know the details of the story, and it's fun to engage them. We bought her on eBay for $2,500, and there were lots and lots of lookers but no takers because she looked so rough. She was in a barn for half a century. The woman who owned the car, Mrs. Martin, we've named it after her, supposedly put it into a barn and let it sit there for half a century until she passed away, and then it went up for sale. Unfortunately, she left some water in the engine, so the engine block cracked. We replaced it with another original Hudson engine. Everything is original. This car is unrestored. 6-volt battery, half the power you need. Dual horn, so half the weighting, they say. This is the funny-looking air filter. It's oil-based. 6 cylinders, flathead 6, 232 cubic inches of power, barely enough for a large tractor mower.
Yeah.
The coil here, 6-volt, we lost that and had to replace it with this one in Youngstown, Ohio, in an intersection. The fan is huge. The cooling system is pretty efficient, but you need it because the car doesn't like sitting in traffic, so you need to be able to cool it down quickly. Okay. And one of the more amusing things, if you can call it amusing, when you're accelerating up a hill, you're using a lot of gas. The fuel pump doubles up as the powerhouse for the wipers. So when you hit the accelerator, you lose the wipers. And they run on cables here. It's a vacuum-powered double pump, fuel pump and air pump for the wipers.
And what's the most impressive thing you've seen infrastructure-wise in your tour thus far? And what's the most depressing thing you've seen, or run-down thing, other than the car, of course?
Well, I mean, we're not far from New Orleans, where we were last. It's recent memory. One of the most impressive things I've seen is just the absolute turnaround of projects that have failed, and what engineering and construction and infrastructure is to me more than ever now is this cycle of bust and boom. Bust is the I-35W bridge. Boom is the new one. Bust was the New Orleans levees during Katrina, and the boom is a $15 billion project that's nearly complete that fortifies the city. And it's this cycle of breaking and building that I think is metaphorical to what this tour is. It's about, we're in a down cycle right now nationwide, and I think we're coming back around again.
And when you talk to public officials and construction contractors and the like about infrastructure, what are they telling you? What are you learning from the people on the ground floor of this industry?
The first question I ask them is there a crisis? I mean, is it really that bad out there? And I have not yet found one person who will say that there's not a crisis. It's one of those rare subjects, it seems, that people are in complete agreement. Where it gets interesting is, what do we do about it? Or can anything be done about it? I have more hopes in some areas. Like, I just know that this is a needed cause. I have less hope that we're going to do it quickly. I've almost given up on that. But what my gut tells me is that we will do the right thing. We will eventually come to the point where we move forward smartly into this fix of America's infrastructure.
Well, tell us, where do you go from here? Obviously, you've done your big loop of the country. You're going back up to the Northeast, but you're going to be at ConExpo as well, right?
That's right. We're almost rounding home. I'll be back in Boston shortly, and then the car has not been shipped anywhere of significance. This will be the first time it gets trailered off to Vegas, and it'll be part of Case Construction Equipment's show in Vegas, highlighting something meaningful, the rebuilding of America, and how closely it's tied to them. But the idea is, we were talking about this earlier, workforce development is something that keeps coming back to us on the Dire States team as an important area to focus on, because without workforce development, we won't have a rebuild, and the rebuild is imminent. It can do so much, and I think it does the most for quality of life and a better America if we focus on the workers and the jobs that infrastructure can create. Okay, and you'll be giving talks at ConExpo and presentations as well? Yeah, at ConExpo, the car will be on display. It'll have its own little booth, have its own little area, and we'll be discussing with people the story of the tour casually and then in a formal presentation too. Okay, and you've been documenting it all along with videotape and whatnot, so if somebody wants to just see what you've done and get a little more detail on the message, there's a website they can go to? Well, thank you for asking. DireStates.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, but go to DireStates.com if you want to see some of these vignettes, these little movies and stories and films about what we've done and what we've seen. We've built up a whole documentary in parts and pieces. Dan and the car will be at ConExpo in the Case booth, so if you get a chance to get out there and see him, and be sure and stop by the website. We'll give you the website address at the end of the video as well. See some episodes from some of the big major infrastructure projects in the U.S. today. So, thanks for watching. And the last thing I would show you is first the interior. It's all original mohair, and we ride in style. Usually I'm with my mechanic, and he sits in the back, and I chauffeur my mechanic around. Yeah. Sometimes I get chauffeured. I really like the nameplate on the sill there. Isn't that sweet? That's kind of a nice touch. I'd like to see that in modern cars, you know. Wouldn't it be nice? And this is part of the trademark, the triangle. It became part of the Hudson logo.
And the tires, now they're bias tires, correct?
Bias ply tires. We wanted to get the full effect. The car really needs them. It doesn't have power steering. It has a large wheel for leverage.
Okay.
And the bias ply really come in handy when you're trying to park in the city or move around. It gets a little strange when you're on the highway because it floats around.
Yeah.
We've got a spare Hudson in the trunk. So we travel with a generator, we travel with a water pump, we travel with just about every spare part we need. And you won't be able to really see it, but you'll appreciate what 4 months on the road looks like. A little food, a little clothing. And back behind here are the extra carburetors, the extra water pump, the generator, the extra parts and pieces that keep the car going.
All right, so you've been a real soldier, huh?
It has been a long Kerouacian road trip.
Kerouac was never that brave.
I don't think he was mechanical. I don't even think he had a driver's license.